Hello, my name is Daniel Alter, and thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to start by taking a moment and reflecting on our current situation. I appreciate all of you joining me here today, and I hope you, your immediate family, and all your loved ones are feeling well, and I pray that you are all safe. With God's help, this unforeseen and unprecedented time period in our lives will be behind us soon enough. I'm glad you are here with us at this webinar, where we'll be able to provide some very important information for you and your laboratory at these uncertain times, and when this is all behind us and how to continue to operate. So very excited again. My name is Daniel Alter, and we have our panel list of experts and different perspectives. First being with Bennett Napier, who is the Chief Staff Executive for NADL, the National Association of Dental Laboratory, as well as we have Laura Kelly, who is the CEO of Microdental Laboratories and Modern Dental. And last but not least, we also have Natalie Westfall, who is the Vice President of Henry Schein Financial Services. And I'm really excited to be able to share all of these different perspectives from different areas to be able to provide you a lot of information and how to proceed with moving forward during this crisis. We're all in this together. We're a very resilient industry, and there's no doubt that we'll emerge out of this better than ever. So with that said, if we can just take a moment to kind of just share from the panelists what their expertise are and where they're a little bit about themselves. So Bennett, if you can start it off, that'd be fantastic.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you to the Henry Schein and Zahn Dental team for putting this together. And the more information that we can share with everybody in the profession and the industry, the better off we all learn. We're all learning together as we go through this, and we'll all get, like you said, Daniel, we'll get through this together. So appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you today. Just from a little bit of background, just from beyond the role that Daniel introduced me, I've been in the dental field since 1994. All working with nonprofit organizations in the dental field. Started out on the hygiene side and been in the laboratory side almost 25 years. It's been a pleasure to work with this great community. And like Daniel, like you said, it's a resilient group of people, and that's what gives us all hope, knowing that we're going to be fine. It's not fun right now. It's not going to be fun for a little while. But this community, if you will, really comes together and shines in times of crisis, and so I know we all know that will do us all well down the road. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. Absolutely.
Laura?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. And you know, I echo Bennett's words as well. It's a true honor to be here with you, and thanking Henry Schein for putting this on. This is just a real good way for us to connect and share, you know, information. And I think that's what everybody's wanting to do right now. You cannot over communicate, you know, in times like these. So, and things are changing real rapidly. You know, from my particular role is overseeing all of North America and Canada for the Microdental Modern USA division. So we've got 24 locations, you know, over 620 people, and you know, this is there's no playbook, but we're doing a really good job staying connected to our customers and our employees and all of you, you know, and appreciate the support that we have from wonderful partners and strategic partners and people like all of you on the call today too. So excited to participate. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Natalie?
Great. I'm Natalie Westfall from Henry Schein Financial Services. I live in the Boston area. I've been in the dental financing arena for over 25 years. I've spent the last 12 years or so at Henry Schein, but prior to that, I worked at banks on the healthcare lending side, focusing really primarily in the dental space. So the past several weeks have really been a challenge for us on many fronts. So I'm really glad to be here today and try to help some of our customers through this. But we're really facing this on a global basis. Henry Schein, as you know, is a global company. I manage our team across the globe, and we have customers everywhere who are impacted by this. And we just want to, you know, provide as much information as we can to help them. So thanks for being here. I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you all for being here, of course. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at different, we are all together and we're facing similar challenges, but perhaps we have different perspectives as a small, medium to large laboratories and organizations all throughout. So we'll discuss the different things and different strategies and perspectives from that. But Bennett, if you can start us off with kind of the state of the industry and what you're hearing from your membership and what you're learning throughout the country.
Certainly, appreciate it. Certainly I know LMT and IDT as trade publications have done a great job of kind of covering some of the changing dynamics, if you will, and NADL is clearly obviously doing the same. And I guess for better or worse, the data kind of is the same regardless of the source, and it is changing. And I think we're all trying to determine, kind of what the lingering effects of this pandemic are from an economic standpoint. And so if we just take some context, at least from the NADL constituents, really we kind of started the clock, if you will, starting with like March 16th, and kind of looking at what laboratory owners or managers had done since March 16th relative to obviously whether it's a state executive orders or certainly obviously orders from the boards of dentistry as it relates to their client base. And so, I think the first week, if you will, of the path, a few labs started to do furloughs or layoffs just for many reasons, but kind of got ahead of this, and other people were trying to see, okay, what does this look like before we make real significant decisions. But within a 7-day period, the vast majority obviously of laboratories, well over 60%, certainly now, as we are in now in mid-April, have done at least furloughs. A little bit over 30% have laid off employees, and then almost a strong percentage have done a combination of layoffs and furloughs. And obviously the cause and effect is pretty common sense in the sense of work's not coming in. Were works in progress in early March, mid-March that were still in the laboratory, and then kind of hit a wall. And so if we look at what American Dental Association has put out in terms of their member data, obviously we're tied at the hip, if you will, in terms of what's happening in dentistry on the clinical side, and labs feel it clearly. So I think now mid-April, as we go through this panel discussion, if we look at comparatives, people are down, both on the clinical side and the lab side, probably 90% or above in terms of revenue decline. So that's a astronomical statistic to think about. And the issue is obviously as we're in mid-April now, do certain states open back up around the May 1st timeframe, mid-May. Some states are still looking potentially to June 1st or maybe even mid-June. And then what do those trend lines look like as we kind of progress back into some type of production? And so it's pretty sobering. And as we've all watched social media, I mean, like Laura said, we're over communicating, and that's good because we all need to kind of be learning and sharing with each other. But we are starting to see both on the clinical side and the lab side, from some of the initial data, as each week progresses, people are saying how long can they last in terms of their lifeline. And I know we'll talk about on this panel some of the economic relief at the federal and state level. In many cases that might have been the only lifeline for some small businesses, laboratories included. And if those aren't available, it's a difficult proposition. They really don't have any buffer to fall back on. And so we, obviously 30 days later from mid-March to mid-April, already starting to see some labs, especially for some of the smaller labs that the owner was probably 2 or 3 years away from retirement. We've started to see on social media saying, hey, we're locking the doors and this is it. So that's unfortunate, clearly, because it's, the timetable was not theirs, in the standpoint of the timing of it. And sad to see some of that, but that is a harsh reality both on the clinical and lab side that I think we'll see. If we look at some of the ADA data, I know ADA is going to release some new data from their Health Policy Institute in late April, but some of their initial data showed, if some of this lingers into August, a good portion of dental practices, effectively have said, they won't make it, if you will, if there's not any predictability in terms of patients coming back in at any reasonable level. They might be able to make it to May or June, but if we go into August, some of those practices just won't make it. And obviously that's clearly will affect us, and from a laboratory standpoint. And so obviously we have a whole lot of, all of us have hope and faith that things will progress faster than hopefully some of the news will tell us. But again, that's it is a harsh reality of where we are right now.
Now, Bennett, just for some context and for some of those technicians and lab owners out there, would you mind just kind of defining or explaining the difference between furlough and laying off? What does that mean for people?
Sure. I mean, I think we have enough confusion already, and even normal times, furloughs and layoffs are confusing. And now when we have 22 million unemployed right now or filed unemployment already, that's a staggering number. So, furloughs effectively in a traditional sense, and I'm not a HR, consultant, if you will, but learned enough to be dangerous lately. But, furloughs obviously is kind of what I would call like an interim step that people considered and said, okay, we have some predictability that hopefully within, let's just say 8-week period, if you will, that people can come back to work. And so, during a furlough period, it's up to the discretion of a business, laboratories included, where they say, well, is part of that paid? Is that furlough period unpaid? But we haven't terminated employment, if you will, or we've reduced hours. So there's a variety of options within the context of furlough. It's less, I guess I'd say it's almost like a marriage. Is it a separation or a divorce? And that's kind of a good way to, look at an analogy there, where a layoff is clearly like, okay, we're done. If we can rehire you later, we'll do that. But there's a little bit more finality to it, obviously from both the employer and the technician perspective, and as different HR components in terms of compliance that come with that. And I think the other thing that's, we've had to work with laboratories around the country, as obviously, Zahn and Henry Schein has done from a partner standpoint, is each state has different unemployment laws. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so, that's another thing that people have to take consideration. What are the different, not only from the system issues that we've all seen on the news in terms of the systems crashing because of the volume of applicants, but just also how is it done? And from an employer standpoint, we would just try to, guide people to utilize some of the resources that are available, especially for HR consulting groups like Society for Human Resource Management as an example. Just use resources that are out there. This is not a time to wing HR decisions, given both the short-term and long-term implications, not only for the employees, but also the business itself. And hopefully it gives some visualization kind of between the two differences. And I think, again, we'll talk about the economic relief packages. It's all about the clock. And I think that's why people have had to make different decisions of whether can they actually, do a furlough, even if that's conceptually what they wanted to do. Can they afford to do that is a different question. And so I think, again, as time progresses, people are in many cases being forced to make decisions that they probably don't want to make, in terms of going the layoff route, because that's just really the only way to keep the doors open and then, try to rehire people on the other side of this.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I think it's an excellent explanation. Thank you. Natalie, so speaking of the relief plan, or the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program by the SBA, can you share with us what is what is happening, what is going on? And I know that you hear of some people, and many people that have applied and are either queued, and certainly if you can explain some of the ramification to what
Sure.
those mean.
Sure, absolutely. So the Paycheck Protection Program was part of the $2 trillion CARES Act. The program opened up on April 3rd, and it was expected that there would be unprecedented demand for this funding, and they were 100% right, because as of this morning, April 16th, the $349 billion that they had allocated to this program has now been fully exhausted. So there are several small businesses that did not get their applications completed and get themselves in the queue in time. But I think the demand was just was so much bigger than the supply for the program. In addition, the SBA's resources, they really didn't even have the right resources to be able to even support the level of demand that they had. The program was so attractive to people because, if it was used for the right type of expenses, it was more of a grant than a loan. And it was fully forgivable. And that was obviously, very attractive to many small businesses. And those businesses that, 500 fewer employees, they're really being hit hard by this. So when the window for funding opened, there was also some challenges with the SBA system. Certain SBA, there's about 1,800 SBA lenders who are approved to offer SBA loans, but sort of at the 11th hour, the guidelines were coming in as to who could process them, who couldn't. And we heard a lot of noise and a lot of, stories in the media about large banks like Bank of America, Wells, Chase, really limiting who they would process a loan for. So as of a couple of days ago, Bank of America had processed over 350,000 loans for customers, and they were limiting who they would process a loan for business banking customers who had a borrowing relationship. So they were really limiting who they would offer the loans to. And it was very clear early on that it wasn't going to be enough money. Now there is another $250 billion that's pending approval from Congress. We're all hopeful that this will come through because our customers need it. Small business owners need it. And hopefully the program and parameters will stay the same. So essentially the way the loan works is they have a couple of important dates. So February 15th is kind of a key date here, that if a small business was in operation prior to February 15th, they would be eligible for the loan. If they have 500 or fewer contract or salaried employees, they're eligible for it. They have to have paid salaries and paid payroll taxes. Independent contractors could apply for the loans on their own, so that was also attractive for them. But what's really, really attractive to these businesses is the 1% interest rate in 6 months without any payments. So this is really giving businesses an opportunity. If they rehired 75% of their staff or 75% of their payroll expenses by the end of June, then their loan would be forgiven. In addition to the payroll costs, which includes benefits, they also could use the money for interest expense for loans prior to February 15th, rent, utilities, and mortgage. So as long as those non-payroll expenses did not exceed 25% of what the loan was used for, then those funds, 100% of the loan would be forgiven. So obviously that's very attractive to people. It took a long time. I think it was probably more than a week. All these applications were going into the system. The SBA's processing system went down and crashed a few times because it couldn't handle all the volume that was coming in. So there was this massive backlog. So a lot of customers that we've worked with have applications that did not get through the process at this time. But what we're encouraging them to do is if you've started the process, the lenders that are processing these loans are anticipating that the funds will be back. So like you said, get your applications in, get all your payroll forms uploaded so that as soon as they open the window again and the SBA turns their system back on, you can get in early, because I think a lot of people have received the funds, but there's still a lot that want it as well.
And when it comes to application, one among many questions that I get from laboratories, there's an option of going obviously through your bank or your vendor, as well as going directly through the SBA and applying directly. Are there pros and cons to either option?
Yeah, so the Paycheck Protection Program actually has to be processed by a lender. And what we're advising people that if you have a relationship with a bank and your bank is actively processing these loans, that is most likely your fastest way to get the funds. A lot of these banks are not processing these PPP loans, but those that are, that is definitely a customer's fastest way to get the funds. The economic injury, disaster loans, the EIDL loans, those have to be processed directly through the SBA, and you can't use your bank at all for those. And those have an enormous, the funding, the funding is just about exhausted there too. And there's still a backlog of people that haven't received their money yet, but they are in process. We're also trying to encourage people that while you try to apply for these other funds, just to, banks are certainly still lending money to people, but as the situation continues, you don't really know what's going to be available 3 months from now. So we're encouraging people, if they have opportunities to apply for other types of loans, working capital or refinances or anything to help take some strain off their cash flow right now while they wait for this other funding, we're at least making those options available to them so that they really know what's, they're exploring all options. Like I said, we just don't have any guarantee that this money will be back. And we also don't know how long it will last, because the demand, the longer the situation goes on, the demand is continuing to grow. And there's also a large segment of business owners that have more than 500 employees. And there's also some discussion that, is the next round of funding, maybe not this $250 billion, but is there going to be some relief coming for those larger businesses as well?
Interesting, thank you. And going back to the SBA loan, certainly for payroll and for to keep the business afloat, is there a contingency in there for health benefits for the technicians? And what are those to do that are furloughed or laid off? Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so the Paycheck Protection Program, the healthcare benefits are included as one of the forgivable expenses. So the whole point of the Paycheck Protection Program is to keep people employed, or at least have them back employed by the end of June. So all of the healthcare related expenses, including their payroll and benefits, would be included in that. So there's been some, and there's really an 8-week window in which the funds have to be used. So what a lot of people were asking early on is, when should I take the money?
Right.
This 8 weeks, am I going to be open? So we've been really, telling people they should always talk to their own accountants, but it does make sense given the massive demand of the funding to get your application in and get your SBA number, as you said, and then with the goal of bringing at least 75% of your workforce back, including benefits for the cost and everything. So,
Daniel, if I can add to that, just on the PPP program, just as it relates to ADA and NADL, there's a lot of what ifs, if you will, that we'll know in the next couple of weeks. But let's just take an assumption that there's additional funding, for that program, and so who knows whether that would be $250 billion for the next round, and would they add another round? Who knows? None of us know that today. But in collaboration with the American Dental Association and other groups on the clinical side, NADL did sign on to a letter to Congress April 15th, and as it relates to that particular program, in the sense that a lot of laboratory owners have said, well, we've got some cash right now, some, not unlimited, but we think we're going to need it later. And so a lot of people are saying, well, we're going to apply for that, but in an ideal world, because once that money comes in your account, then the clock starts ticking on that 8-week period. So ADA and NADL did sign on to that letter to the members, the leadership of Congress, to say, if there's another round of funding and this program continues to some extent, to effectively allow the usage of those funds, meaning if you get approved for it, that you could, extend this through December 31st, 2020 instead of past June. Just meaning the standpoint, like I'm probably going to need that 8 weeks of 2.5 time payroll, if you will, in the third or fourth quarter, as opposed to right now. And so that is something that's been submitted to leaders of Congress, on behalf of dentistry, and NADL signed on to that. Just from that very standpoint of, we still think the third, fourth quarter, people need cash now, and some of them need it now. Other people have a little bit of a buffer, but think they're going to hit the wall later, and so that's the, it's like a chess game. And so, but I just want to make it known to the listeners, that's been requested at least on behalf of dentistry, and NADL signed on to that as well from a conceptual standpoint.
That's fantastic, and thank you for that, Bennett. I mean, there are some laboratories that I've spoken to that were hoping that this was going to be something of short in nature, and were funding their employees and salaries and benefits, hoping to, that this will to ride out the storm, shall we say, which unfortunately has lasted a lot longer. So with that said, and both either Bennett or Natalie, you can answer this, but is there a retroactive component to this for those folks that have done so? To recoup some of their losses through this SBA program?
Well, I think the guidelines for what they qualify for are pretty clear. It's really 2.5 times your monthly payroll expenses. So, depending on, if that extension is approved, I think the maximum amount that they can borrow is really capped at today anyway, is capped at the 2.5% of their payroll expenses. So if this extension is approved, I think that would be great, because it gives a little bit more flexibility. But I don't think it really changes the amounts very much, unless you disagree, Bennett.
Totally agree.
I also think when this started, I don't think anybody realized how these bills were, and this money was put aside before we realized the extent that we were going to be facing here. So I think it does require a new level of action at this point. It's different than when it started, for sure.
I agree. Thank you. And Bennett, from your experience and what you're hearing from the NADL membership, have people received money? What has their experience been with this program? Just share what you've heard and what you've seen.
Sure. I mean, it's a mixed bag, which is what you would expect. Some winners and some losers, and some kind of in the holding pattern, unfortunately. So, yeah, as Natalie said, I mean, assuming that there's another round, I definitely, I would say, from a kind of, and it's not scientific, but just anecdotal, it has seemed to be labs that were in more what I would call rural areas, and maybe had more of a community bank type relationship, maybe where there were less applicants in that particular geographic location, actually seemed to fare better, meaning they got approved faster. In some cases, they got their money already. And obviously, if you're, not to say the big banks don't have a lot of leverage in most cases, it's just they have more customers. Right. So the queue of people in the pipeline was broader. So, I definitely have started to see, again, some of the bigger banks where, labs had applied through bigger lenders that were their established business, banking relationship. It just took them longer, one, to get the approval, and two, to get the money. Even today's April 16th as we take this, even labs that have gotten approval, the banks are saying, 7 to 10 days more before they'll actually see the money enter their accounts. And so, I'd say, like I said, some of the more rural areas, community banks is where we saw relief come faster. I would say, to Natalie's point, assuming that there's another round of relief, like she said, just don't throw in the towel yet. I mean, if you were in process or had an application in, keep that relationship open in terms of communication with the banks. Because the magic, if you will, we all need that, is if you get a SBA loan number, if you will, as far as it relates to your application and your approval, even the money hasn't entered your account yet, effectively, from an SBA standpoint, they say that money is earmarked for your particular loan. And so that's the kind of almost the silver bullet, if you will, that people need to continue to ask their banker about, is as they're looking at their bank portals, at their dashboards, is there any other documentation that they might need to add that would slow down their underwriting or speed it up? And then once they know that they've got a SBA loan number that the bank has secured, That's the biggest issue, is to be cognizant if that's actually occurred or not. Because once it's occurred, you're probably pretty safe because it's earmarked within that fund of whatever that amount of money is that Congress designates. But up until that point, if you don't have that, then you're going to be like a lot of businesses Natalie said today, that the money's exhausted. So they might have done everything right, but that just hadn't been secured yet, and now they're going to have to go to round 2.
So you bring up a very great point, which all the listeners should be listening to. Number one, everybody should apply. Whoever is within, they should apply, so this way they secure their place in the queue and they secure their position. But on the second point, what I'm hearing is also that they should follow up with their banks or their whoever the lender is, because they may be missing something and the lab owner is waiting to hear from their lender. And in fact, they're so inundated with what they're doing that there may be a piece of document that is forcing them to be delayed that they could resolve really quickly. So communication with the lenders, communication with the bank that are facilitating this is a key, and certainly having the application in while the funding is still there is excellent. Thank you. Now, so Laura, and we're all, you're all leaders in your space, but can you share with us organizationally and culturally with microdental, as you're learning all these things that are constantly evolving by the second, what, number one, if you can share kind of your position at the moment, and what is it that you're outwardly sharing or communicating with your employees, your clients, as well as your supply chain?
Yeah, that's that is definitely the theme, that we've been just behind. And you put together these contingency plans in the beginning as you see things unfolding, and then there's like version 1 to, I don't know, we're on 22 right now or something, I'm sure. Right. But one thing that stays very consistent, for us is, and I'm sure for everybody it's the same way, is that, our people are definitely our most valuable resource, and the dental community is safe and healthy, and then staying really connected, right, to all of our employees, our customers, and our valuable suppliers, our partners, in this. So we're having a lot of conversations, a lot of telephone calls, a lot of clients with emails and webinars, and we started a podcast series with some of the most successful dental practices, dentists in the United States who have been in practice for a long time in all different parts of the United States, to just share some comeback strategies, what they're working on now, what they went through when it was 9/11, or 2008, and some of the other challenges that they faced. How did they not just, recover, but actually create even a more successful practice than they had before? I think people, I know I need it, and I feel that our teams need to focus on, where are the opportunities, and what can I be working on now to strengthen ourselves so that when we come out of this, because we will, right? It's going to happen. It's not going to not be painful, there's difficult decisions that need to be made, but I think really working on the things that we were working on before, that we knew we needed to do to become more efficient, we're just accelerating some of those types of plans and discussions. But really the bottom line is just really staying connected to our clients, and finding out what their concerns are, really listening to them. What are the patient's concerns that we can, address now and plan for, moving forward. So really no other way to get that information. And the thing is people have a lot of time right now, to talk and share their thoughts and concerns. So we're making sure that we stay in touch with everybody, our people, like I said, the suppliers, and then also our customers.
Right. So as the lab owners and managers in this space that are in this unfortunate times, what do you suggest for them, and how would they communicate to their employees, whether they're furloughed or laid off, or even they're currently existing? What is the message, or the positive message in this, and how should they approach that?
Yeah, I think everybody's situation is going to be different, right? Every different lab, the size, but I think right now is a really good opportunity to invest in yourself, invest in education, invest in taking there's free time right now where you can actually really, get more involved in digital industry, you know, learn more about iOS, learn more about what's going to be important moving forward, you know, to be able to prepare yourself. And stay connected. There's going to be opportunities out there for top talent for sure, you know, and there's going to be places where, you know, we're going to need that. And so I think that investing in your skill set and making sure that you stay abreast and don't, you know, don't just watch Netflix all day, right? Like you've got to stay. There's a lot out there right now that's just amazing. You know, a lot of really top education, and it's free for people to access. You know, and I think that just stimulates your mind to look for those opportunities and prepare yourself for people who are going to need you.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you 100%. And this is the philosophy that I live by. And in fact, it's also an opportunity to we're forced to stop. We're forced to look around and reflect and identify things that perhaps when we're busy, we're too busy doing things. And now we can identify and say, wait a minute, we can do this better, or we can change this, or we can satisfy our customers that much better. So it's an opportunity to reflect on how we do business today and how we can develop it to become even better. Because as you said, this will end, and those that are ready and energized and have grown in their knowledge base and as well as their skills are just going to explode out of the gate and ready to grow and conquer that much more. So fantastic. With that said, and Bennett and Laura certainly, do you think there are opportunities learned as far as business? Will business models change due to this fact? Is any of that in play?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy answer is yes. You know, what those models look like, I mean, I think you can have some predictions, but I think there'll be some new ones that evolve that we may not even think about today. You know, I think as the first month of COVID, and I like Laura on her previous webinar was talking about, you know, before COVID, and then she does after COVID, AC, you know, is, you know, so I'll steal her thunder there. You know, the client relationships are going to look different. The expectations are going to be different because the patients are going to drive, you know, have some different, you know, expectations and demands, if you will, on our dental customer base. And laboratories are going to have to adapt to that too. And so, you know, I think there'll be clearly some innovative labs. I mean, technicians by nature are creative people, which is great because that's where we're going to need it. And so if we use some of that innovation and creativity to help, you know, not only ourselves, but also to help the customer relationship in terms of communication of what are some barriers that the practice sees to instilling consumer confidence to get patients back in the chair. Are there things that can be done differently, you know, across the laboratory office relation and the dental office relationship that could expedite a turnaround? So I definitely think you're going to see some labs, you know, whether it's marketing or, you know, labs that go in and maybe, you know, maybe have a more concerted effort in terms of, you know, whether it's infection control protocols or quality assurance processes that it not only instill confidence in the consumer, but also the staff of the practice. I mean, so, you know, there's some sources of data, you know, that have been out there, you know, that kind of talk about, and that's why ADA has been so focused on this. You know, ADA has launched a task force that they've announced, and, you know, relative to what does the dental practice look like, you know, after COVID, if you will. And so, you know, a side note is one of the task force members on that, that the president of ADA has appointed is a dentist from Florida, Dr. Rudy Liddell, and he just rolled off of the NBC Board of Trustees. So the last several years, he's been on our NBC board. So he's been, you know, firsthand working with NBC and NADL. So he's got a really strong understanding of the laboratory community, which I think is good. And so, you know, but going back to the business models in terms of, you know, threats and opportunities, if you will, you know, dentist, assistants, and hygienist, based on some of the data that you look at in terms of, you know, their vulnerability to, you know, COVID now and in the future, they're like over a 90% risk factor. So you know, that again, for the staff as well as the patients, we've got to figure out how to provide assurance that it's safe to come back into the practice. Technicians are not immune from that. Obviously, technicians that go chairside would have those same issues. If we're talking about the laboratory setting itself, we still have precautions that we need to take and that are always been there. We're more in like the 31% risk factor, so vastly different, but mainly because we're not, you know, obviously seeing patients, generally speaking, except for shade verification, that kind of stuff. So there are, to Laura's point, there's a lot of opportunities on the other side of this if people have you know, mitigated their current inefficiencies or looked at things in a different strategic manner. You know, that there'll be some ways to capitalize on this. You make a bad situation and have some positives out of it. So I definitely think labs that are starting to think about that are going to be ahead of the game, because the traditional work, the tail of this, I think, you know, is going to take longer than most people think. And so what do you do in the meantime? The meantime is the revenue generation is going to be based on maybe other services as opposed to products that you might be selling to the dental customer that will, you know, not only buy you time and cash flow, but also get you a competitive advantage for the long term.
And Lauren, just a question. You know, now with everybody working from home, have you explored that option, and is that a viable option for once we emerge out of this for some technicians to work from home?
Yeah, you know, well, for instance, we have the technicians, we have out of our 24 facilities, we have 3 that are just partially open with skeleton crews for emergency and special services right now. We do have technicians that are staying engaged, you know, with clients and doing sort of teleconsulting, you know, because that was something like Bennett mentioned earlier, going into the offices, right? We have conversion specialists and things like that, people that are doing digital support. So a lot of that we're doing remotely right now. We also have a customer experience team that is taking, you know, phone calls. We actually have a 24/7 live answering service now, and the team is taking inbound and outbound calls for the entire network, staying connected, you know, making sure that, you know, doctors have a lot of cases in the queue, right? And they may want different shipping arrangements or different ways to get in contact with them. We're making sure that we have all of their most recent contact information updated in our system so that we can communicate any updates to them. And, you know, as we see different parts of the United States sort of maybe coming back to life, you know, we're going to have different, I would anticipate our labs will come back at a different time. This switch isn't just going to, you know, flip on and, you know, shelter in place is lifted and we're all back to work that next day. So, you know, staying really, you know, close to your teams and your technicians and taking care of them now, you know, as much as we can with some extended PTO and different things that we're doing for them and supporting their health benefits. You know, I think we're looking at changing, we have a couple of different phases and a couple of different ways that this could plan out as far as what the model of the demo labs will look like. But working remotely, working differently is definitely going to be part, you know, of the plan. I don't see, and I could be wrong, but I don't see, you know, salespeople, you know, going into offices like, you know, we did before. I think that you'll see remote lunch and learns, right? You'll see different ways of engaging. You're still going to keep that connection. You're just going to do it differently. So, you know, we're working through every part of our business and looking how we can do that more efficiently and better, healthier, safer, you know, as we come out of this for everyone.
Absolutely. And this again for either Bennett or Laura, are there any, as we're learning and we're growing and we're exploring things and identifying things, are there any laboratories that are strategizing when it comes to, you know, a piece of equipment or perhaps infrastructure changes, or anybody looking to emerge out of this that you know from your experience? And certainly, Laura, you can share if that's what you're doing in your laboratory. But is that happening? And if it is, can you kind of suggest what some laboratories may want to consider?
You know, I think you're going to see much more collaboration, you know, within the laboratory. I mean, we've always been that type of environment, thanks to Bennett and ADL. You know, you bring us together every year for amazing education and meetings, and have a good way of keeping us all connected. But I think now, you know, there's going to be ways that, you know, some labs will be able to really help, you know, some of the other smaller labs or boutique labs, if you will. I know that we're specifically looking at, we were looking at this before, and now, you know, we have some time, right? We are accelerating our efficiencies with our digital workflow, you know, and how we can support our entire network of labs even better. I think that becoming more efficient, and our doctors are really going to need us to be even better. So we're looking at that and investing in technology right now to come out of this in a strong position. So
excellent.
Yeah, and if you're a small lab, I mean, it doesn't mean that even if you don't have that capital, right? There's not. I think that there's just a lot of willingness to partner, right, and to form more collaboration within the dental community. I think we all want to help each other, right, be successful. And there's a lot of great talent out there, and I know that we can help support. You know, together we can help support one another in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you can share with us, what efforts are you deploying in maintaining your infrastructure currently? And then if you can show kind of like your vision as to when we slowly come back, what is that going to mean for your infrastructure, and what are some of the strategic planning that you have?
Yeah, I think that what we're looking at and trying to collect data worldwide, really, to try to see how this is coming, what we might anticipate. It could be a little bit different, because some people, you know, might not know that modern, you know, microdental is here in the U.S., but modern, which we're a part of, is in 18 different countries, right? So we have the advantage of seeing what happened in some of the other regions at a different time. And so you can kind of give a timeline of when you think things are going to come back. But, you know, this is the United States, so we do things a little bit differently too, right? And I think what we're trying to really focus on is analyzing what type of work we might see coming back sooner, right? And preparing for that. I think a lot of the technicians that we have that are fully skilled, right, in multiple areas, that's a really good way of looking at phasing, you know, who you bring back and when. I think it's going to be case type, you know, dependent a little bit. You know, taking a look at removable markets versus implants, you know, what was going on before, what's going to come back now. We're doing another webinar series coming back where it has nothing to do with lab work. It has everything to do with direct composite bonding, you know, and just trying to get doctors thinking about, you know, what might they be able to provide a patient that's an interim result, getting them better dental care, right, that will lead to a future restorative case that we'd be a part of. Right. You know, we just want to help support, get everybody back to work, and you know, start moving this thing forward so we can, you know, get a little bit busier and you know, bring everybody back. I mean, I think that's what everybody wants to do. And it's going to be a build. It's going to be a build, but I feel good about what it's going to look like at the end of the year. You know, better than now. We know that. And we don't know exactly what it will look like, but I feel that the dental community and the United States here, we are very solutions oriented, you know, and we're going to find something that's going to make this as best as it can be, as quick as it can.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a great point.
Daniel, I was just going to follow up kind of to the question that you had, and then Laura's commentary about different business models. And you know, I guess it's not unique or original to me, but just if you look at, you know, case communication, you know, obviously a lot of it's focused on the technical components of it, but certainly a lot of labs had already gotten into the content area of, you know, what I call more business management education for their customer bases. And so, you know, like a better term, I mean, practice management consultants are not going to like what I'm getting ready to say, but who better than dental laboratories to effectively serve as a practice management consultant for their clients? They see the good, the bad, and the ugly across dentistry, not only in the technical side, but also the business side. So, you know, I could certainly see some labs either who have already kind of started doing some of that, or labs that, you know, could expand that as a revenue service area, to help clients, not only keep their doors open, but grow. Inside, I could see a lot of labs really capitalizing on that, because they have the knowledge base, they see the trends, and it's all they're having to do is share what they know, and then how to apply that experience across their customer base. I could definitely see that as a growth area for some laboratories, depending on what their client base is.
And also, so we're certainly, as we rebuild as an industry, we have our clients that are rebuilding equally the same. Are there any financial considerations, and is there going to be a financial relationship change between the clients and the laboratories? Are the laboratories perhaps going to have different terms? Like, what are your thoughts on the financial end of things as the relationship with the client and the dentist, or rather the laboratory and the dentist?
Yeah, I think that's always been kind of a topic, from time to time. I mean, this is a relationship business, and when you're in a relationship, and a lot of our labs have had relationships with their customers for, decades. And through that time period, there's ups and downs, and there's different things that have presented themselves, other challenges outside of what we're dealing with now. So I think that most labs that I speak to, they deal with that on a one-on-one basis, depending upon what's important to that customer, and what you can do for them. This is a long-term relationship, and I think that people, in what I've seen from being in large labs and a small boutique lab that I had myself, that's what we do, is we figure out how to create that lasting relationship and work together.
One thing I would say to that subject is just, obviously, given the dynamics, everybody is in the same boat. The supplier, the clinician, the laboratory. So everybody in the supply chain is feeling the pain in one way or the other to different degrees. And so I think the issue comes down to setting expectations and having open communication. It's not, like it's unclear why people are having pressure. I think everybody in the supply chain, cash is king for everybody in that supply chain. And that as long as you establish some open communication and expectations of what are everybody's needs, and what are reasonable payment terms that can hopefully meet at least everybody's needs in a fairly equal fashion. Everybody's going to take a little haircut in terms of probably aging, in terms of payment streams and stuff like that. It's just a matter of setting those expectations and working collaboratively. That's going to be the key.
And Natalie, as Henry Schein in the supply chain, certainly financially, where do you see the future, and are there any release valves, for lack of better words, while we're dealing with all this?
Yeah, we have a lot of different, what we're calling really financial flexibility tools that we're making available to our customers, the dental offices, the labs, as well as the patients. So the patients have access to financing if they need assistance for their treatment. And then as far as the financial flexibility for the offices, we have really a variety of different tools that we're making available. We have some short and longer term merchandise financing programs that we put together. So when offices are back up and running and they want to invest in technology, as they've been using their time for Zoom and education and learning about different ways to run their practices, we plan on really making a lot of products work for them differently. Offering 6-month payment deferrals before they have to make any payments. If they do want to invest in revenue producing equipment, if they want to bring solutions together. So, we're looking at it from a lot of different ways at Henry Schein, but I think we have, the patient and the office as our customer in mind with all the different solutions that we're putting together.
When it comes to the landscapes, and specifically in dental laboratories, when it comes to PPE, we've heard so much of that in the news. What will that look like in the future in dental laboratories landscape? Is that going to change? I know people are going to be obviously hypersensitive to what we've just have gone through, but how is that going to change going forward?
I mean, I think just in general, some labs will look at this as a potential business unit on a more long-term basis, as opposed to the community spirit of some labs have obviously gotten into doing face shields or N95s, those types of things, during the pandemic, which were to, obviously to serve a universal short-term supply chain need, which has been wonderful to see that. They're depending on the types of products, if you will, in terms of how those PPE are defined. There are different FDA compliance elements that come with it. So they may be trying to do good, but they may be also entering themselves into some FDA areas that they probably didn't intend to go. But with that said, I definitely, laboratories have, the labs that have 3D printers, they have the technology, can use it for more than one thing, obviously. So I think there will be, again, going into whether it's, if nothing else, just an additional, revenue department. I can't, not to say that some labs may completely change their business model, and that's their new business mission. I think for most labs, it's probably just going to be another department that they could consider to, whether it's as a subcontractor, contract manufacturer type relationship, if you will, that they do certain component parts as opposed to a full, the full enchilada, if you will, that might has more FDA components of cost and expense there. But I think people have determined what they can do reasonably in terms of production and what the protocols are. So I definitely, in many respects, I don't see this as a short-term thing for some labs, because they've kind of gotten it down to a science, and probably, and if you can get it down to a science in a crisis environment, that's tells you could probably do it in normal times. So some labs, I think, will consider continuing to do that. Others, may only do it in times of need, but that's okay too. So.
And internally, for the technicians working in the laboratory, do you think things will change for what they need to wear and how they need to protect themselves in a laboratory, whether it's a mask, whether it's a shield, whether it's other protection equipment? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, going back to what I said earlier, I mean, that's that risk scale, comparatively to occupations, and that there's a couple of sources, listed like 1,000 occupations, and attributed a risk, if you will, of if there's another round of COVID, what's your risk in the work setting? And again, unless something changes, laboratory technicians, at least compared to the clinical side, were much lower risk. So we've always had risk. We know that, given materials and just close proximity to workstations, depending on the work environment of that particular lab's physical layout. I think we've all, the CDC guidelines, if you will, for dental settings are out there. Obviously, we've always had the OSHA standards to follow. I think materially the standards probably won't change a lot, in the sense of those standards were good before, they're good now. I just think people will be more cognizant not to take them for granted. I think we all in the laboratory community, kind of get complacent, if you will, and say, well, this isn't going to affect me. But I think we've all learned our lesson the hard way. Is like, let's be more mindful of why we have standards in the first place. And I think, and I think many cases, honestly, at least the labs I've been in, it's less the employer it's more the employees is saying, let's let my guard down. The employers are employers for a reason, and always want to make sure health and safety is there. And it's usually the technicians to say, I don't want to do that. It gets in the way. But I think, it'll be less of a hard sell for owners and managers to kind of say, no, this is why we need to do this. I think it's going to be less of a hard sell than probably it used to be.
Yeah, and I agree with Bennett. I think that, we've always had those standards, and I think we're just going to try to do everything to make sure that's top of mind for everyone, right, through our responsibility of communication and having our internal health and safety committee really engage and monitor even more. But I do think that natural, this situation is going to have people naturally gravitate towards doing that and being more compliant. And, we're always going to be looking for ways that we can do this even better, and part of this is the digital workflow. I think that that's a huge part of what can help improve this, as well as, other things you can look at, right now, even with just supporting the essential services, We have a large building that has, typically would have 160 people in it, and has maybe 20, right? And they're very spread out. I think that we'll see that in our business, but we're also going to see it in a lot of other businesses, whether or not, that's restaurants or sporting facilities, when you go to a sporting event, continuing education, looking at how that's going to happen. I still really feel like people are going to want to come together, when we're able to. We get a lot of satisfaction off that and being able to learn over the shoulder. And but instead of maybe having 30 people in a room, you might have 10, right? So I think all of that will be looked at in the dental laboratory physical environment as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, and definitely when you go into the clinical setting, I mean, obviously delivery drivers, that's going to be a whole new, protocol, if you will, and then certainly technicians, as we all know, are going more based on case and treatment planning, or conversions, going chairside. That's definitely going to be a different area of focus in terms of, what are the expectations, not only expectations for the clinical staff and the patient, but what's important for the technician, in terms of their PPE to protect themselves in that, in that setting. So again, I think you have different protocols based on the setting that the technician's operating or working in, but all are important and not to be taken lightly.
Excellent. So now is my last question to each. If you can just take a moment, kind of just share with us two things. Number one is from as leaders in your fields, in your spaces, what have you learned from this crisis for the profession to kind of know and grow and perhaps learn from you as well? And then what do you see 6 months to a year from now looking like? So Natalie, if you can start us off, please.
That's a great question. So, well, one of the things, obviously Henry Schein's a really large company. And one of the things that I've learned is, how important it is to be nimble. This situation has evolved so quickly. And I'm really impressed with, as an organization, how quickly we've been able to move and pivot and adjust our sales to keep up with the situation. So that is something that when we're through this, I hope we can keep that, because sometimes when you're in a larger company, things can sometimes take a longer period of time to do. So I hope we can keep that, ability to be nimble and react quickly to what our customers need. I think that's always been a specialty of ours, but I think we really, stepped it up even during this crisis. And then, I do agree with the comments that Laura and Bennett made earlier. But I think we will all get through this, but I think we'll all be different on the other side of it. So I don't think we're going to just be going back to business as usual. I think this will stick with us a long time. And, I, for one, I don't know if I was naive, but I just don't think I really thought anything like this would be possible in this day and age, to be, quarantined and homebound for as long as we have been. So for us, I think 6 months from now, we're not just going to get a note that people can open their offices and open their businesses and everything's back to normal. I think we're going to have to ease into it. And I think we're going to have to make sure we're, more cautious in the future, knowing that this is possible. We have a lot of people that are working remotely. And that's not really something that we had a lot of before this started. So I think that's going to be an interesting, thing that we'll look at as we get through this is that something that we can limit the number of people that are in certain spaces at the same time? Can we do more remotely? We're doing a lot of Zooms and video conferences just like this one. And I think as a company, that's something that we will do a lot of as well. But then also I think for our customers and our relationships with our dental labs and all of the offices that we serve, I think, being more than just a supplier and being somebody that's really there to help them manage through a crisis like this, manage their business and help everybody and help the patients. I think we were already really exceptional in my humble opinion, but I think we'll be even better in 6 months because we went through this together. I think it's been a learning experience, but I think we'll get through it and we'll all be look differently, but I think we'll be really well positioned to help our offices, our customers, our labs, our patients in the future.
Fantastic. What about you, Laura?
Gosh. Well, I mean, the nimble thing, absolutely. You know, I couldn't agree with that more. Also, just, I think what I've learned through this so far, and I'm not done because it's not done, but I know that I'm still learning, is, you know, making some decisions and taking some actions quickly, you know, is really important. It's better to do that than wait too long on some of those decisions. They may not be perfect, but you took action quickly. And honestly, I really, it's even more clear to me the value of having everybody behind you. You know, when you're in a leadership position, you're really only as strong as your team, right? And you need everybody to really kind of get behind the direction that you're going to go in, you know, for the health and the strength of the company and for the employees, and the importance of having that team, because it's never one person. You know, we're only as strong as our team, and so I really value the team that I have, and I'm appreciating that much more. I think I'm really noticing how much I appreciate this dental profession and the people that we get to work with and for, and our team, and what they're willing to do, you know, to get us through this and make it better. So really valuing that a lot right now.
I mean, it sounds like, you know, old hat, but it's just been reinforced, just the collaborative and community spirit of our, you know, of our market. And just, it's obviously been difficult times, and like Laura said, it's not over yet. And but just seeing the ability for competitors, you know, whether it's through social media message boards or chat groups or whatever it may be, just to share, you know, just using the PPP as an example, you know, just people who were different parts of the process along the way reporting in and saying, hey, this is what we found on step number 5, and somebody was on step number 1, and just really almost being like a CEO peer group, if you will, virtually, to help kind of, you know, reward people who got, you know, finished, and then cheer the rest of the people that were in, you know, in the midst of the process. So, and then sharing, you know, what are the you know, turnarounds, and how are you implementing it, that kind of, just, and that's just one example, but just there's myriads of examples of, even going back to the printing of PPE, you know, who did you work with, what kind of resins, you know, all that kind of stuff. Just the sharing and caring, it's been great to see that. It's not new, but it's just been reinforced to a new level. You know, just going forward, you know, I think, you know, just in our interaction with ADA, we've, you know, believe it or not, I mean, you know, we've, at least in a deal perspective, we've always had a good relationship with ADA in terms of open communication. You know, they're the 800-pound gorilla, we all know that. But just, I think in terms of our interaction with the staff and their leadership, you know, especially given the climate we're all in, I think they have a very strong awareness. Not that they didn't have it before, like AAACD has always been a poster child for this, and prosthodontic groups too. But ADA, I think, has got a very strong, renewed awareness that their members, the only way their members are going to be successful is if they have laboratories to work with. They're only going to come out of this in a positive light, working with a laboratory and laboratory technicians to help them get their practices back to where they want it to be. So I think that will help us, at least from a laboratory marketplace standpoint. That, you know, we've always tried to kind of be the subtle, you know, messenger on that, and sometimes loud, but sometimes subtle. And I think it's top of mind now, like, oh, that this community is extremely important to us, and dental practices are only going to be successful if they have a good lab partner to work with.
Well, fantastic. I honestly, I enjoyed this conversation so much. I mean, I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for your leadership, your pearls of wisdom. Stay well, stay healthy, and we'll see you once all this is done. Thank you.